Usually, when we talk about a diagnosis, whether it's medical or, I don't know, structural or even just mechanical, there's this underlying expectation of precision. Like you expect a clean, undeniable binary.
Right, a clear cause and effect.
Exactly. You break your arm, you go to the hospital, and the x-ray shows this jagged white line on a black background. And the doctor just points at the screen and says, there it is. That's the fracture. It's localized.
The problem is exactly where the pain is.
Right. But when you step into the framework of analyzing human destiny, when you're trying to map out why, certain areas of your life are just thriving while others feel like you're walking through wet cement, that x-ray metaphor completely falls apart.
It really does. Because you might look at a specific domain of your life, let's say your career or a long-term partnership, and think everything is perfect.
Yeah, you look at it, go, I put all the right ingredients into this area, so why is there so much friction? And the diagnostic landscape of the human experience is just murky, because in the system we are exploring today, the answer to why you are experiencing pressure in one room of your life is, very often sitting entirely across the house.
The influence causing that friction or even an unexpected windfall, right, might not be occupying that area of your life at all. It's projecting its intent from a distance.
Which brings us to our mission for you today. We are doing a deep dive into the profound, highly technical mechanics of traditional Vedic astrology, which is known as Jyotish.
And specifically, we are going to isolate and examine the concept of planetary aspects.
Yes, or what is known in the original Sanskrit as Drishti. Okay, let's unpack this. To do this properly, we are drawing directly from the foundational classical texts, the manuals compiled by the ancient Seers.
We're talking about the Brihat Parashar Horashastra, which we'll probably just refer to as BPHS to save time.
Good call. And the Servali, the Lagu Jatakam, and the Jataka Saradeep. But before we get into the weeds here, we need to set a rule.
A very strict rule. Before we go a single step further, we have to draw a hard, absolute boundary around this conversation.
We really do.
Because we are sourcing from these specific ancient texts, we have to completely exclude Western astrological frameworks.
We're leaving all of that at the door, no exceptions.
Right, because if you are familiar with Western astrology, you're used to aspects being defined by strict mathematical degrees.
Like the exact geometry.
Exactly. Two planets are exactly 90 degrees apart, so they form a square, which causes tension. Or they are 120 degrees apart, forming a trine for harmony. Jyotish simply does not operate on that mathematical geometry.
Really different.
It operates on sign-to-sign relationships. If a planet is sitting anywhere in the sign of Aries, whether it's at the very first degree or, the 29th degree, it casts its influence onto the entire sign of Libra.
Whole signs.
Yes. This conversation is purely about the ancient Jyotish understanding of planetary sight, operating entirely on whole sign paradigms.
So it requires a complete paradigm shift in how you visualize the sky. And to build that visualization for you, I want to start with the vocabulary. Because, man, when I was reading through the translations of BPHS, I was struck by how much psychological weight the original Sanskrit holds.
The translations often lose the gravity of the original words.
They really do. We translate these words as planet or aspect in English, and it just strips all the agency away. In English, a planet is just a big rock orbiting a star. But in Jyotish, the word for planet is graha, and the etymology there is fascinating.
The literal translation of graha is that which seizes, or the grasper.
The grasper. That sounds almost predatory.
It comes from a root word implying a sudden taking hold of something, almost like an eclipse taking hold of the light. It's not passive.
Right, it's active.
Yeah.
It implies a living consciousness that is reaching out and grabbing you. When you have a graha placed in your chart, it isn't just sitting there like a paperweight on a desk.
Not at all. It is actively seizing a portion of your psychology, your karma, and directing your physical experiences. They act as agents of delivery.
Delivery mechanisms for your karma.
Exactly. And they operate within a framework of signs and houses. A zodiac sign is a Rashi, which conceptually means a heap or a cluster of stars, like a specific environment.
Okay, so Rashi is the environment.
And the house, the domain of life, like your finances or your health, is a bhava. And bhava translates to a state of existence or a state of being.
So you have this conscious agent, the graha occupying a state of existence, the bhava. But the real star of today's analysis is Drishti.
Drishti translates literally to sight, look, or glance. It is the gaze of the graha.
And understanding Drishti is the key to moving from a two-dimensional understanding of an astrological chart to a three-dimensional living matrix.
It's what makes the chart breathe.
Exactly. I was trying to conceptualize the physical difference between a planet occupying a house versus a planet aspecting a house. And I came up with an analogy. Let's imagine a planet sitting in a house as a tenant, living in a specific apartment in a large building.
Okay, I like this.
Let's say it's the second house, the baba of accumulated wealth, early childhood, speech.
So the tenant has signed the lease on that specific state of existence.
Right. This tenant is living in the apartment. They are managing the immediate interior. They're painting the walls, fixing the plumbing, dealing directly and physically with the resources of that room. They have physical jurisdiction.
They are managing the local karma.
Exactly. But Drishti, the planetary aspect, is what that tenant is doing when they walk up to their living room window, lean on the sill, and stare fixedly across the street at an entirely different apartment building.
They are projecting their consciousness out of their own environment.
Yes. They're projecting their influence, their desires, their specific energy into an entirely different area of life without ever physically stepping foot inside it.
That's a profound distinction.
Right. If that tenant is inherently volatile and aggressive, and they spend all day glaring at the public park across the street, they are going to make the people in that park feel deeply uneasy.
Even though the tenant isn't in the park.
Exactly. But their gaze is fundamentally altering the atmosphere of the park.
And this brings us to the foundational rule of that gaze. If we look at the Lakujjakam, specifically Shloka 13, which is heavily corroborated in the Saravalli, by the way, the Seers establish a universal baseline for planetary sight.
A universal default.
Yes. All planets, every single graha, regardless of its nature aspect, the seventh house from themselves, with full 100% strength.
I want to pause on that because it's such a massive architectural rule. The sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, every single one of them stares exactly across the street.
Straight across the zodiacal wheel.
Right. If a planet is in your first house, it looks at your seventh house. If it's in your fourth house, it stares at your 10th house. It is a direct, unbending line of sight. But my question is, why the seventh?
It's a great question.
Why did the Seers codify the seventh house as the universal default for full, maximum planetary vision?
To understand that, you have to look at the philosophy of polarity and opposition inherent in Jyotish. The seventh house, from any starting point, represents its direct mirror.
Its counterpart.
Exactly. Its counterpart and its necessary completion. You cannot understand the concept of self, which is the first house, without the concept of the other, which is the seventh house.
You can't have up without down.
Right. You cannot have the deeply private internal foundation of the fourth house without the external, highly visible public action of the 10th house.
There are two sides of a coin.
They are inextricably linked. So wherever a conscious graha sits, its primary, unadulterated gaze is drawn directly across the wheel because consciousness naturally seeks its reflection.
It's looking for a reaction.
It seeks to interact with the environment that challenges and completes its current state of being. Going back to your analogy, the tenant looks out the largest window in the apartment, and that window always faces the building directly opposite.
That makes so much sense. The dynamic tension between opposites is what generates life.
Exactly.
Okay, so the primary window always faces the seventh house. But as I was cross-referencing these texts, I realized the architecture of this site isn't monolithic.
Not at all.
There are actually two completely different systemic frameworks for how aspects function. Two different lenses. And this is where I think a lot of people get completely tripped up when studying Jyotish.
It is a very common point of confusion, but distinguishing between the two is vital. The texts clearly delineate between Graha Drishti and Rashi Drishti.
Let's pull these apart, starting with Graha Drishti, which is what we were just talking about with our tenant analogy, right?
Yes. Graha Drishti is the planetary aspect. This is the sight driven by the agency, the psychology, and the inherent desire of the planet itself.
The grasper.
Right. Remember our definition of Graha as the Caesar. Graha Drishti is active, it is dynamic, it is the tenant actively choosing to walk to the window and stare across the street because they want something from that space.
The sight is fueled by intention. It's a subjective sight. The planet is looking with an agenda.
Very much so.
But Rashi Drishti is completely different. Rashi Drishti, which was extensively codified by Sage Jaimini, is the sign-based aspect.
And this is where we have to remove the planets from the equation entirely for a moment.
Yes, ignore them.
Right. Rashi Drishti is driven by constant fixed spatial geometry. In this framework, the zodiac signs themselves aspect other signs based entirely on their inherent modalities.
Whether they are movable, fixed, or dual signs.
Exactly.
I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of this. In Gemini's system, a movable sign like Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn always aspects all the fixed signs except the one sitting right next to it.
Correct. The movable signs project onto the fixed signs. The fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, project onto the movable signs.
And the dual ones?
The dual signs, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, all aspect each other. And they do this permanently, endlessly, regardless of whether a planet is sitting inside them or not.
Wow. So if Graha Drishti is the tenant actively choosing to stare out the window with a personal agenda,
Yeah.
Rashi Drishti is the architectural blueprint of the building itself.
That's exactly it.
It's like the building was constructed so that the structural layout naturally funnels wind or light from, an eastern hallway directly into a western courtyard.
The building does this constantly.
It doesn't care who rents the apartment. The structural relationship is permanent.
That is an excellent way to separate the two. Rashi Drishti provides the permanent environmental conditions, the structural layout of karma.
And Graha Drishti?
Graha Drishti provides the psychological intent, the dynamic, evolving desires of the entities moving through that layout. And while Rashi Drishti is incredibly powerful for certain specialized timing techniques, for the scope of our analysis today, following the primary instructions of BPHS and Saravalli, we are going to dedicate our focus almost entirely to Graha Drishti.
Because that is where the psychological drama of the human experience lives.
Yeah.
That is the realm of desire and friction. Now, we established that all planets stare directly across the street at the 7th house with 100% strength. But the texts get incredibly granular. They don't limit the grahas to tunnel vision.
No, the vision of a graha operates much more like a field of vision.
Right.
And this is where the mathematics of Jyotish become astonishingly elegant. In the Saravalli, chapter 32, shlokas 32 and 33 outline what we can call the fractional glances of the planets.
Fractional glances, I love that term.
They essentially possess peripheral vision.
I was absolutely fascinated by this fractional breakdown. They stare straight ahead at the 7th house with 100% focus. But they're catching other houses out of the corners of their eyes.
Yes, the text is very precise about this.
According to the text, every planet casts a 1/4 or 25% aspect on the 3rd and 10th houses from itself. They cast a 1/2 or 50% aspect on the 4th and 8th houses, and they cast a 3/4 or 75% aspect on the 5th and 9th houses.
It creates a complete geometric web of consciousness radiating outward from the planet's position.
It's everywhere.
It is highly aware of the 7th house counterpart, deeply aware of the 5th and 9th, moderately aware of the 4th and 8th, and just barely keeping a peripheral eye on the 3rd and 10th.
Think about driving a car on a highway. You are dedicating 100% of your forward focal vision to the road straight ahead of you. That is your 7th house aspect.
A good analogy.
If something jumps into the road, you react instantly. But you aren't completely blind to the rest of the car. Your 75% vision is catching the side mirrors. Your 50% vision is catching the dashboard dials. And your 25% vision is that vague awareness of a car hovering in your blind spot.
Yeah.
You aren't dedicating your main processing power to the blind spot, but the fact that you know a car is there subtly modifies how you grip the steering wheel and when you choose to change lanes.
That subtle modification is exactly how peripheral Graha Drishti functions.
Yeah.
But the ancient texts do not leave this as a vague abstraction.
No, they give it a math equation.
They quantify it mathematically through a concept detailed in the Jyotish called Drigbala, which literally translates to aspectual strength.
And this is where the physics of Jyotish get really nuanced, because the math actually changes depending on the inherent nature of the planet casting the light.
It does.
I was reading that a benefic planet and a malefic planet do not dispense energy equally, even if they're casting the exact same fractional aspect.
The Jyotish is very clear on this. The texts state that a benefic planetary aspect, which is the gaze of a naturally gentle, nourishing planet like Jupiter, Venus, or a waxing moon.
The good guys, basically.
Right. They provide 125% strength multiplier in their Drigbala calculation.
125%.
It over-delivers grace. It provides more light than its geometric fraction demands.
It's an abundance of energy. It's pouring surplus nourishment into the room it is looking at.
But a malefic aspect, the gaze of a harsh, restrictive, or cruel planet like Saturn, Mars, or the Sun, operates on a deficit.
So what's their number?
They only provide 75% of their calculated aspectual strength.
75%. I found this concept so profound that, like a benefic gaze is actively trying to assist you. It is expansive by nature, so its light spills over the brim.
Yes, it wants to give.
But a malefic gaze is fundamentally restrictive. It is withholding. It gives you the absolute bare minimum of its attention, just enough to cause friction or delay, but it refuses to nourish the space.
It reflects the absolute core nature of the grahas. Benefics expand, connect, and nourish. Malefics contract, separate, and restrict. Even the physics of their sight, the literal light they cast across the chart, behaves according to this mathematical law of expansion versus contraction.
Okay, so we have established this incredibly precise baseline. Every planet has a 100% aspect on the 7th, 75% on the 5th and 9th, 50% on the 4th and 8th, and 25% on the 3rd and 10th.
That is the standard architecture.
But as with any ancient complex system, there are profound exceptions to the rule. Why do some planets get what essentially amounts to a VIP pass to break the universal geometry?
You are referring to the Essence of Drishti.
The special aspects. The foundational texts explicitly state that 3 specific planets are granted exceptions. They are allowed to look at houses other than the 7th with full 100% strength, effectively having multiple primary windows in their apartment.
Those 3 are the outer planets, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn.
Why just them?
Well, from an astronomical perspective, they are the planets furthest from the sun that are still visible to the naked eye. They move the slowest through the zodiac, and consequently, they carry the most profound, enduring karmic weight in a human life.
Because they take so long to transit.
Exactly. The Seers granted them Essence of Drishti, or special aspects, because their inherent natures are so potent that they demand a wider field of complete, unmitigated focus to accomplish their karmic agendas.
I want us to spend a significant amount of time here breaking down these 3 planets one by one. Because honestly, if a listener takes nothing else away from this deep dive, understanding the specific sightlines of Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn will fundamentally change how they view the architecture of their own life.
It is the most practical application of this knowledge.
Let's start with Mars.
A highly kinetic place to begin.
Right. According to BPHS and Saravalli, Mars retains the universal 100% full aspect on the 7th house, but it is also granted a 100% full aspect on the 4th house and the 8th house from its position.
Yes.
To understand why Mars gets to flood the 4th and 8th houses with its full attention, we have to look at how the texts define its core identity.
If we consult the Laku Jatakam, Shloka 3 provides the physical and psychological profile.
It is pretty intense.
It describes Mars as fierce, youthful, having pale red eyes, being bilious or pitta in its Ayurvedic constitution, and possessing a body replete with marrow.
Replete with marrow.
The classical commentaries expand on this to explain that Mars governs muscular strength, the biliary tract, adrenaline, weapons, accidents, and surgical domains. Mars is the soldier, the commander, the protector, and the penetrative surgeon.
Mars is pure, focused, kinetic energy. It is the biological drive to defend and to conquer.
Yes. So let us examine why the Seers assign the 4th house aspect to the soldier. In the structural sequence of the zodiac, the 4th house represents the home, the inner sanctuary, the mother, the psychological roots, and the literal base of operations.
The safe space, basically.
Exactly. When Mars looks exactly 4 houses away from itself, it does so with the fiercely protective, deeply territorial gaze of a commander guarding a fortress. It is a defensive perimeter aspect.
But wait, if Mars is this fierce armed soldier and its 4th house aspect is essentially stationing that soldier in your living room, doesn't that protective gaze actually end up suffocating the space?
How so?
I mean, having an armed guard in your house might keep burglars out, sure, but it also means you're living with weapons and tension in your place of rest. You can't relax.
That is the exact paradox of the Martian 4th aspect. The intent is protection, but the result is often domestic tension.
Right.
When Mars casts its 100% gaze onto a house via its 4th aspect, it says, I will defend this space with my life, but I will also bring my armor, my adrenaline, and my hypervigilance into it. If Mars is sitting in your 1st house, the house of the self, it is casting its 4th aspect directly onto your 4th house of home. It makes the individual fiercely protective of their family, but it can also indicate that the home environment is argumentative, loud, or devoid of true relaxation.
Because the guard is always pacing.
The protection comes at the cost of peace.
That is a brilliant distinction. The intent versus the execution. But then we have the 8th house aspect. The 4th house is the home base, but the 8th house in Jyotish is the domain of sudden changes, vulnerability, the underworld, longevity, trauma, and deep transformation. Why does Mars get 100% vision into the abyss?
Because if the 4th house aspect represents the defensive posture of the soldier, the 8th house aspect represents the lethal, penetrative strike of the weapon.
Ouch.
This is where Mars acts as the surgeon. The 8th house deals with things that are hidden, chronic, or suddenly life-altering.
It's the ambush.
Precisely. Mars looking 8 houses away is Mars peering directly into the hidden vulnerabilities of the chart. It is an intense, unyielding gaze.
And when a planet casts an aspect, it's transferring its energy, right?
Yes, and the energy of Mars is sharp, hot, and sudden. Therefore, its 8th aspect often correlates to a sudden, forceful event.
Like what?
An accident, a necessary surgical intervention, a sudden break in a contract, or even a violent psychological transformation. It is the active, aggressive energy of Mars plunging a scalpel directly into the most sensitive house of the zodiac to excise whatever is stagnant.
So imagine you, the listener, have Mars sitting in your 10th house of career. That Mars is projecting a 100% defensive perimeter aspect onto your 1st house of self, making you fierce and driven.
Yes.
It is opposing your 4th house of home, bringing that career tension into the living room. And it is launching a 100% penetrative surgical strike onto your 5th house of children and creative projects. That is an astonishing amount of dynamic pressure radiating from a single point in the sky.
Which is precisely why seasoned Jyotishis often spend more time analyzing where Mars is looking rather than where it is sitting.
The sitting position is just the launch pad.
Exactly. The aspects are the actual explosions.
Okay, let's pivot from the explosions to the absolute opposite end of the spectrum. Let's look at the next VIP, Jupiter, the Great Benefic.
A much more pleasant gaze.
For sure. Jupiter is granted full 100% sight on the 5th house and the 9th house from itself, in addition to the standard 7th. I was looking through Saravali for Jupiter's physical description to see if I could find a clue as to why.
And what did the text reveal?
It paints a very specific picture. It says Jupiter has a large, prominent belly, is golden in color, consumes honey and ghee, and signifies supreme wisdom, spiritual teachers, and Vedic rituals.
A very jovial, expansive figure.
Yeah, but the physical trait that stuck out to me the most was that it specifically notes Jupiter has large, beautiful eyes. Why do the ancient texts care about the cosmetic appearance of a planet's eyes?
Well, they don't care about cosmetics. They're describing the physics of its drishti.
Oh.
The eyes are the literal instruments of the planetary gaze. A graha, described as having large, beautiful eyes, possesses a gaze that is inherently wide, benevolent, gentle, and all-encompassing.
So Jupiter isn't squinting through a sniper scope like Mars.
Not at all. Jupiter is taking in a vast panoramic vista with profound grace. Its vision is unrestricted by fear or aggression.
And it directs that wide, golden gaze, specifically to the 5th and 9th houses.
Yes. If we look at the geometric architecture of a Vedic chart, the 1st, 5th, and 9th houses form what is called the Dharma Trikona,
The Grand Trine.
the grand trine of purpose, righteousness, and divine grace. The 5th house is the domain of children, the intellect, creative merit, and the good karma you bring from past lives.
And the 9th.
The 9th house is the domain of supreme fortune, spiritual wisdom, higher education, and the guru or guide.
So Jupiter, which inherently rules wisdom and grace, gets a special VIP pass to look directly at the houses that naturally align with its own core nature. It gets to look at the houses of merit.
It acts as the ultimate multiplier of merit. When Jupiter looks 5 houses or 9 houses away from its position, it is pouring honey and ghee, metaphorically speaking, into those specific areas of your life.
It's just flooding the zone with goodness.
It is a protective, expansive, and elevating gaze. It actively blesses the intellect and it safeguards your spiritual fortune.
So if Mars is the armed guard pacing the perimeter with a rifle, Jupiter is the benevolent, wealthy grandfather sitting on the porch, watching you play in the yard, making sure you don't fall, and quietly depositing money into your college fund without telling you.
That is a highly accurate analogy. Its gaze is pure, unconditional nourishment.
Wow.
If a house in your chart is under intense pressure, say it is occupied by a harsh planet or going through a difficult transit, and Jupiter casts its 5th or 9th aspect onto that house, Jupiter will actively intervene to rescue it from total destruction.
Like a shield.
The texts often state that a single aspect from Jupiter can nullify 100 doshas or flaws in a chart. It is the ultimate diagnostic antidote.
I love the idea that Jupiter's gaze is a literal rescue mechanism, but we can't stay in the sunshine forever. We have to address the final outer planet, and arguably the one that causes the most anxiety for anyone studying their own chart, Saturn.
Ah, the great karmic equalizer.
According to the texts, Saturn receives 100% special aspects on the 3rd house and the 10th house from itself. I went back to Saravalli for the physical description, and the contrast with Jupiter is just jarring.
It is the polar opposite.
It really is. It describes Saturn as dark in complexion, having protruding teeth, stiff hair, and a tall, thin, almost emaciated physique. It is a planet that governs the downward, crushing pull of gravity, immense sorrow, exhaustion, and sometimes physical lameness.
Saturn is the embodiment of time, aging, and inescapable reality. It is the taskmaster.
No honey and ghee here.
No, it has no excess fat. It is stripped down to the bone. It represents the burdens we are forced to carry.
So if this exhausted, heavy, emaciated entity is casting its 100% gaze, where does it look? The 3rd house and the 10th house.
And we must ask why those two specific houses. In the structural sequence, the 3rd house is the domain of self-effort, raw courage, short journeys, and the use of one's own hands.
And the 10th.
The 10th house is the domain of ultimate public action, career, status, and the heavy mantle of leadership.
Both of those are what Jyotish calls upachaya houses,
Yeah.
right? Houses of growth over time.
Exactly. Upachaya houses represent areas of life that start out difficult but improve through sustained, grueling effort over the lifespan. Saturn's gaze is the mechanism of that grueling effort.
Okay, walk me through that.
When Saturn casts its 3rd house aspect, it looks at the house of courage and says, "You must sweat for everything you achieve here. Nothing will be handed to you. You must put your own hands into the dirt."
It's a heavy, structuring, and often isolating glance. It demands absolute discipline and denies easy shortcuts.
Yes.
But wait, if Saturn is looking at your house of effort, doesn't that just mean failure? Like, why call it growth over time if Saturn just throws an anvil on your motivation?
Because Saturn does not deny, it delays. That is the critical distinction.
Denies versus delays, got it.
Saturn wants mastery, and mastery requires repetition and time. When Saturn puts an anvil on your motivation, it is testing your endurance. If you give up, yes, it manifests as failure, but if you carry the anvil, Saturn eventually grants unparalleled, unshakable strength.
Which perfectly explains its 10th house aspect. The 10th house is the peak of the chart. It's the career.
The 10th house aspect is Saturn looking directly at your life's work. When Saturn aspects the 10th from itself, it fundamentally slows the machinery of your career down.
It throws sand in the gears.
It creates obstacles, difficult bosses, and agonizing delays in promotion. It forces you to build your professional foundation brick by agonizing brick. It intentionally causes separation from the fruits of your labor until you have proven your absolute, flawless mastery of the material.
It's the micromanaging, uncompromising boss who insists you show your work for every single equation, penalizing you for the slightest error, but ultimately turning you into the most competent person in the building.
Yes. While it feels oppressive and agonizing in youth, Saturn's gaze is ultimately what creates enduring, permanent structure.
Because it's solid.
Exactly. A career built under the gaze of Saturn cannot be destroyed by a sudden change in luck because it wasn't built on luck. It was built on the undeniable reality of sustained effort. But you must endure the agonizing delay of its sight.
This breakdown of the Vishisha Drishti, the special aspects, completely revolutionizes how you should look at your chart. You might be staring at your chart thinking, my 10th house of career is completely empty. Why is my professional life such an endless grinding struggle?
And then you look across the chart.
Right, and then you realize that Saturn is sitting 4 signs away, casting its 100% 10th house gaze right onto your career. The heavy, emaciated tenant down the street is staring at your office window with a clipboard, relentlessly judging every single move you make.
You are no longer looking at an empty room. You are looking at a room flooded with heavy structuring light.
It's mind-blowing.
And that realization transitions us into what is arguably the most complex and nuanced layer of this entire diagnostic system, the qualitative impact of the gaze.
Right, because up to this point, we've been talking about the geometry, where the planets look. But the classical texts are incredibly adamant that the quality of the aspect is entirely dependent on the nature of the aspecting planet.
The gaze is fundamentally altered by the consciousness and the agenda of the graha doing the looking.
The aspecting planet dictates the operational reality of the aspected planet. The entity receiving the gaze is forced to modify its behavior based on who is staring at it.
Yes.
I was reading through the Jataka Saradeep, and the author provides these incredibly vivid, almost cinematic examples that illustrate this perfectly. I want to walk through a few of these because they bring the theory into stark, practical reality.
Please do. The classical combinations are the best way to understand how the base placement is hijacked or elevated by the aspect.
Okay, here's a fascinating one. The text sets up a base scenario. Mars placed in its own sign. So imagine a person has Mars sitting in Aries or Scorpio.
A very strong placement.
Exactly. This is a very strong, comfortable, highly capable Mars. The soldier is in his own fortress. The text states that if this strong Mars is aspected by the sun, the native will be wealthy, beautiful, learned, and a leader.
Let us break down the why behind that result. The sun represents royalty, pure authority, the soul, and illuminating light, the king. When the sun casts its gaze upon the capable soldier Mars, it elevates that soldier to the status of a noble general.
Oh, that makes sense.
The sun's aspect illuminates the raw kinetic power of Mars and directs it toward righteous leadership, public honor, and consequently, wealth. The soldier is given a divine mandate.
It's a perfect synthesis of energies. But then the Jyotish immediately contrasts it. It says if that exact same Mars, sitting in its own sign, is instead aspected by Saturn, the outcome is entirely inverted.
Completely different.
The text says the native suffers from thieves, is unkind, and devoid of respect.
It is a profound, tragic contrast. Let's look at the mechanics. Saturn is the planet of deprivation, restriction, fear, and the lower classes of society.
The taskmaster.
When Saturn casts its heavy, dark, restrictive gaze upon the highly energetic, capable soldier, it deeply frustrates that kinetic energy. The soldier is trapped.
He wants to run, but he's in wet cement.
Exactly. And what happens to a capable soldier who is denied honor and forward momentum? He becomes embittered. He resorts to underhanded, frustrated means.
He goes rogue.
Or, because Saturn represents loss and deprivation, the soldier's energy is sapped, and he becomes the victim of thieves. Saturn separates Mars from its noble honor. I want you to notice something crucial here.
What's that?
The base placement did not change. Mars was still in its own sign. The tenet did not move. But the identity of the person staring through the window fundamentally rewrote the destiny of that room.
It's like having a multi-million-dollar high-performance sports car. If the sun aspects it, it's like putting a professional Formula One driver behind the wheel on a pristine track. It performs brilliantly.
A great modern analogy.
But if Saturn aspects it, it's like slapping a heavy metal boot on the tire and leaving the car parked in a dangerous neighborhood. It's the same car, but the external influence dictates its operational reality.
That is the exact mechanism of Graha Drishti.
Let's look at another example, this time focusing on Jupiter. We established earlier that Jupiter is the great benefic, the multiplier of grace. The Saravalli provides a scenario where Jupiter is sitting in the 9th house, the house of fortune, higher wisdom, and divine grace.
An incredibly auspicious placement.
Super lucky. The text says, if this 9th house Jupiter is aspected by both the sun and Mars, the native gains sovereignty, precious stones, gold, courage, and excellence.
Again, we see the synthesis of temporal power with spiritual grace. The sun is the king, Mars is the supreme commander.
And they are both looking at Jupiter.
Right. They're both looking at the advisor of wisdom, sitting in the house of supreme luck. It is a recipe for absolute dynamic material and spiritual success. The active, fiery power of the sun and Mars activates and materializes the spiritual luck of Jupiter. The grace becomes actionable.
But then the text flips the variables again. It says, if that exact same Jupiter sitting in the 9th house of fortune is aspected by the sun and Saturn, replacing Mars with Saturn, the native is still a leader and still affluent, but they have a strict, almost obsessive tendency to accumulate and hoard wealth.
Yes, the dynamic shifts entirely.
They behave like a strict accountant. And in a fascinating quirk of translation that I want you to explain, the text notes that the Sanskrit word used for accumulate can also imply adultery or keeping secretive, hidden affairs.
The nuance of classical Sanskrit is vital here. Let us look at the energetic shift. By removing Mars and inserting Saturn, we introduce the energy of fear, restriction, and a deep-seated belief in lack.
Even though Jupiter's still in the 9th.
Exactly. So instead of the generous, expanding sovereignty produced by the sun and Mars, the sun and Saturn aspect makes the individual highly anxious about losing their Jupiterian fortune.
They become terrified that the luck will run out.
Exactly. So they hold tightly to their wealth. They become a hoarder of resources, the strict cashier who pinches every penny despite being wealthy.
And the adultery part.
That psychological restriction, that shadow of fear cast by Saturn, can easily spill over into secretive behaviors. If you are constantly hoarding and hiding your resources out of fear, you develop a psychology of compartmentalization and secrecy. Hence, the translator's note on the dual meaning. The hoarding of wealth and the hoarding of hidden, illicit relationships. The grace of Jupiter is tainted by the paranoia of Saturn.
It just highlights how unbelievably deep the psychological profiling goes in these texts. It isn't just good planet equals good life. It's a complex chemical reaction of consciousness.
That's a perfect way to phrase it.
And that chemical reaction brings us to the ultimate, most powerful interaction of planetary sight in Jyotish, Sambandha.
Yes, Sambandha is the absolute culmination of Drishti. The Sanskrit term translates to binding together, firm connection, or mutual relationship.
Everything we have discussed so far has mostly been a one-way street, a planet looking at a house. But what happens when two planets look at each other?
Things get very complicated.
Let's say we have Mars sitting in the first house, utilizing its universal seventh aspect to stare at the seventh house. But sitting right there in the seventh house is Saturn, who is using its universal seventh aspect to stare right back at the first house. They are locking eyes across the center of the chart.
When two conscious grahas lock eyes in mutual aspect, a sambandha is formed. It is a deep, inescapable, bidirectional intertwining of their energies.
They can't ignore each other.
They are no longer operating as independent agents. They are bound into a singular, complex, karmic equation.
I want to walk through a detailed, chronological case study of this, because I think it is the most practical application of everything we've learned today. Let's use that exact example. Mars in the first house, locking eyes with Saturn in the seventh house. How does that mutual aspect, that sambandha, actually manifest in someone's life timeline?
A mutual aspect between Mars and Saturn is the classic arena of intense, grinding friction. It is the ultimate standoff between the unstoppable force and the immovable object.
Walk me through the timeline of the tension.
Mars in the first house wants immediate action. It desires to move forward aggressively, to conquer, to initiate.
Well,
It is projecting that desire onto the seventh house of partnerships and the external world.
right.
But Saturn in the seventh house is staring back. Saturn's agenda is caution, delay, structure, and intense scrutiny.
So the person wakes up every day with the Martian urge to sprint, but immediately runs into the Saturnine brick wall of reality, telling them to stop and check their shoelaces.
Exactly. In their early life, this manifests as immense frustration. The individual takes bold action Mars, but immediately faces crushing delays, bureaucratic obstacles, or severe criticism from partners or authority figures, Saturn.
It's just constant stop and go.
The home of Mars, the personality, is constantly suppressed by Saturn, and the home of Saturn, the external relationships, is constantly agitated by the aggression of Mars.
It sounds exhausting. Does it ever resolve?
That is the beauty of the upachaya nature of Saturn we discussed earlier. Over time, the sambandha forces an evolution.
So it does get better.
The individual learns that raw, undirected Martian aggression always fails against the wall of Saturn. So they adapt. They learn to structure their aggression. They develop strategic patience.
They figure out how to work within the rules.
The friction eventually tempers the iron of Mars into hardened steel. By midlife, an individual with this specific mutual aspect often possesses an unparalleled capacity for disciplined, sustained, strategic action.
They become a force to be reckoned with.
They become an unstoppable executive force, but only because they survived the grinding friction of the mutual gaze.
That is incredible. Understanding your chart isn't just about reading a list of where the planets live. It is about mapping out this complex, invisible web of where they are directing their attention, who is staring back at them, and how that standoff forces you to evolve over time.
It is a dynamic, living ecosystem of sight.
We have covered an immense amount of ground in this deep dive. We started by discarding the rigid mathematics of Western degrees and embracing the holistic, sign-to-sign visual field of the ancient seers.
A necessary foundation.
We explored the deep conscious desires driving Graha Drishti, contrasting it with the structural, environmental permanence of Rashi Drishti.
We unpacked the elegant mathematics of Drikbala, understanding how a planet distributes its awareness in 25, 50, and 75% fractions.
And how benefics over-deliver light while malefics restrict it.
Yes.
We took a massive deep dive into the heavy, unique Vishesha Drishti, the 100% special glances of the outer planets. We analyzed Mars as the protective guard of the fourth house and the sudden surgeon of the eighth.
We looked at Jupiter as the benevolent grandfather pouring grace into the fifth and ninth houses of Dharma.
And we examined Saturn, the emaciated taskmaster, forcing agonizing but necessary growth through its gaze on the third and 10th houses.
And finally, we explored how the inherent nature of the aspecting planet completely overrides and rewrites the reality of the planet receiving the gaze, culminating in the inescapable karmic bond of Sambandha.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you navigate your own life? It means you have to fundamentally change where you look for answers. If you are feeling chronically blocked in your career, or if you are experiencing an unexplainable protective grace in your relationships, the architect of that reality might not be sitting in the room with you.
The influence might be a conscious entity, a graha casting its gaze from a completely different domain of your life.
You have to stop looking at just the X-ray of the broken bone, zoom out, look at the whole house, and see exactly who is staring through the windows.
You have to follow the sight lines.
Before we wrap up, I know you have one final concept from the text that is incredibly provocative. It's an idea that is going to leave everyone staring at their ceilings tonight, questioning everything we just built.
I do. It is a philosophical and astronomical mystery rooted deeply in the Brihat Parashara Horashastra. We spent this entire hour establishing that Graha Drishti is driven by the planet's consciousness, its desire, and its active visual agency.
Right. The eyes of the Graha matter.
But BPHS details specific planetary states, or avastas, and one of the most critical states is called Kopa, which is the state of combustion.
Combustion. That's an astronomical phenomenon. That's when a planet's orbit takes it so physically close to the sun that it disappears from the night sky.
Exactly. When a planet enters combustion, it is completely eclipsed. It is entirely blinded and consumed by the overwhelming, scorching rays of the sun. It literally loses its physical visibility.
It just vanishes.
The classical text states that a combust planet's beneficial effects are largely incinerated, and its internal state becomes profoundly frustrated. Hence the Sanskrit term kopa, which literally translates to extreme anger or wrath.
Okay, I see where this is going, and it breaks the whole system.
Here is the mystery to ponder. If Graha Drishti is defined as conscious, active sight, what happens to that gaze when the planet is blinded by the sun?
Oh, wow.
If a planet loses its physical visibility in the sky, does it lose its internal conscious capacity to look across the chart? Or does a blinded planet still stare?
Oh, that is a haunting thought.
Does it cast an aspect fueled no longer by clear intentional vision, but by the furious, invisible heat of its own combustion? Does a blind Graha still seize the house across the street, projecting its wrath into the dark?
Does a blinded planet still stare? That completely shatters the neat diagnostic box we just built. We will leave you to mull over that astronomical and philosophical mystery. Until the next deep dive, keep your eyes open and keep looking across the street.